Hello everyone, welcome to Soul Payback. It's amazing to see you here. Before we dive into today's story, subscribe to the channel, hit bell icon, and like the story. Let's dive into today's story.
My mom threw away my acceptance letter to Harvard. She never told me, she never admitted it. She smiled at my graduation years later like nothing had ever happened. And I smiled back, because I already knew. And I had already decided what I was going to do about it. This is not a story about anger. This is not a story about screaming matches or public confrontations. This is a story about what happens when a quiet person finally makes a quiet decision. A decision that changes everything. I was 18 when the letter came. I was 31 when the world found out what she had done. 13 years is a long time to carry something in silence, but some things are worth waiting for. Some things need to be done with steady hands and a clear mind, not with fire, with patience. My name is Daniel Mercer, and this is the story of how I lost everything I had worked for, rebuilt myself from nothing, and then wrote the single most meaningful check of my entire life. Not to Harvard, to their greatest rival. Stay with me, because the way this ends is not what you think. I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Millfield. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, everyone knew your business, and everyone had an opinion about how you should be living your life. My family was not wealthy. My father worked at a packaging plant for 22 years. My mother stayed home until I was 10, then started working part-time at a medical billing office. We were not poor, but we were careful. Every dollar had a purpose. Every choice had a consequence. I learned that early. I learned it the way most kids from small towns learn things, not from a book, from watching, from listening, from noticing what the adults around you never thought a child would understand. My mother was a complicated woman. I want to be honest about that from the beginning. She was not a villain in a movie. She was not cruel in an obvious way. She was loving in the way that some parents are loving, which means she loved you and controlled you at the same time, and she never saw a difference between the two. She had dreams for me. Her dreams, not mine. That was the part that took me years to understand. She wanted me to become a doctor, not because I wanted to be a doctor, because her older brother had become a doctor and it was the greatest thing that had ever happened in her family. It was the story she told at every dinner table, every holiday, every family gathering. Her brother Marcus had gone to the state university, worked his way through medical school, and become an orthopedic surgeon in Cincinnati. He drove a nice car. He had a beautiful house. He came back to Millfield every Christmas, and everyone looked at him like he had touched the sky. My mother looked at him like that too, and then she looked at me. I was the one who was supposed to do it again. I was the one who was supposed to make the family name mean something in a new generation. It did not matter what I wanted, because she never actually asked. I was a serious student from a very young age. I loved reading. I loved history and literature and philosophy. I loved the way ideas connected to each other across centuries. I was not the kind of student who memorized formulas and dreamed about lab coats. I was the kind of student who stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing a book about the Roman Empire and then wrote a 12-page essay about it because no one asked me to, and I just could not stop thinking. My teachers noticed. My English teacher, Mr. Holt, pulled me aside in ninth grade and told me I had a gift for language and critical thinking. He said I should be thinking about schools that matched that kind of mind. He said the word Harvard quietly, like it was something fragile, like if you said it too loudly, it would disappear. I carried that word home like a stone in my pocket. I did not tell my mother right away. I turned it over in my hands for months before I said anything. When I finally told her I was thinking about applying to Harvard, her response was not what I expected. She did not say no, she did not say yes. She smiled and said we would see. That smile. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. I threw myself into academics with a discipline that surprised even me. I studied every morning before school. I joined the debate team. I joined the literary magazine. I volunteered at the public library on weekends. I prepared for the SAT for 8 months and scored in the 98th percentile. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote and rewrote my application essays until they were the best things I had ever written. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Alvarez, called my application exceptional. She said that word to me, and I felt something I had never felt before, like the ground under my feet was finally solid. She submitted everything on my behalf through the school system, but the physical acceptance letter, if it came, would be mailed to my home address. That was just how it worked back then. And that was the first crack in everything. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day in January and February, I came home from school and went straight to the mailbox before I even put down my backpack. My mother watched me do this from the kitchen window. I noticed it once and thought nothing of it. I was too focused on waiting. March came. Harvard releases its decisions in late March. I knew the exact date. I had it circled in my notebook. The days before felt endless. I could not sleep properly. I could not focus in class. I remember sitting in AP History the week before and not hearing a single word Mr. Holt said because my entire mind was somewhere between Ohio and Massachusetts, floating in a space I could not name. The day came. I rushed home. The mailbox was empty. I told myself it was fine. Letters took different amounts of time. Sometimes they were delayed. I checked again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Nothing. A week passed. I was starting to feel something cold moving through me. Not panic yet. Something quieter than panic. Something more like dread. I mentioned it to my mother at dinner one evening. I said I had not received anything from Harvard yet, and I was starting to wonder if something had gone wrong with the mail. She looked up from her plate. She said, maybe it just did not happen. She said it so calmly, like she was commenting on the weather, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. She said some schools were more competitive than others, and there were plenty of fine universities closer to home. She said the state university had a very good pre-med program. There it was, pre-med. She had already decided the next part of my life before I had even finished grieving the part I was losing. I went to my room that night and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I thought about whether I had done enough. I thought about whether my essays were too strange, too literary, too focused on ideas instead of achievements. I thought about every choice I had made in the last 4 years and tried to find the flaw. I could not find one, but I also could not explain the silence. So I did what I had been taught to do. I adapted. I accepted what I could not change. I enrolled at Ohio State University in the fall, pre-med, because she asked, because I was 18 and I did not yet know how to say no to the woman who had raised me, because I thought maybe she was right and I was just being dramatic about a rejection letter. I told myself it was okay. I told myself I would make the best of it. I almost believed myself. Ohio State was not a bad school. I want to be clear about that. It was a large, respected university with serious faculty and real opportunities, but it was not where I was supposed to be. I felt that every single day in a way that was very hard to describe. It was not sadness exactly. It was more like wearing clothes that did not quite fit. You could function, you could walk around and do what needed to be done, but something was always slightly off. Something was always pulling at you. I started pre-med with the same discipline I had brought to everything else in my life. I did the work. I went to every class. I studied. I got good grades. But I did not feel anything. There was no electricity in it for me, no sense of discovery, no feeling that I was moving towards something that was mine. I was moving towards something that was hers, and I knew it. During my sophomore year, I took an elective in economics on a whim. I needed 1 credit, and the class fit my schedule. The professor was a man named Dr. Anand Mehta. He was originally from Pune, India. He had a doctorate from the University of Chicago. He spoke about markets and human behavior the way Mr. Holt had once spoken about literature, like it was alive, like it mattered, like understanding it would change how you saw everything else. I sat in the back of that lecture hall on the first day, and I felt the electricity again for the first time in over a year. I started staying after class to ask questions. Dr. Mehta started giving me extra reading. By the end of the semester, he had pulled me aside and said the same thing Mr. Holt had said to me in ninth grade. He said I had a rare kind of mind. He said I should be building on it. He said I was in the wrong program. I told him I was pre-med because my mother wanted me to be a doctor. He looked at me for a moment. He did not say anything immediately. Then he said, very quietly, that parents love their children, and sometimes that love and what's best for the child are not the same thing. He said it gently, without drama, but I carried those words home that night the same way I had once carried the word Harvard, like something fragile, like something true. The conversation with my mother was not easy. I told her I wanted to switch my major to economics and finance. I told her I found something that genuinely excited me. I told her I had a professor who believed I had real talent in this direction. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said she had not sacrificed all these years for me to end up sitting behind a desk doing math for someone else's money. She said doctors made a real difference. She said doctors were respected. She said I was just getting distracted by something new and shiny. That phrase, new and shiny, like my own instincts were a toy, like my own sense of purpose was something childish I needed to outgrow. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, something more like a door closing very slowly. I switched my major anyway. It was the first real decision I had ever made entirely for myself. She did not speak to me properly for 3 weeks, but I did not go back. I graduated from Ohio State with a degree in economics and a minor in mathematics. I was offered a position at a mid-sized investment advisory firm in Columbus before I had even finished my final semester. It was not a glamorous position. I was an analyst. I made modest money. I lived simply. But I was good at the work and I knew it. Within 18 months, I had been promoted twice. Within 3 years, I was managing a small portfolio for 2 of the firm's larger clients. I was learning. I was growing. I was doing something I had actually chosen. It felt different from everything that had come before. It felt like oxygen. My relationship with my mother during this period was civil, but careful. We talked on the phone every couple of weeks. We had dinner when I came home for holidays. She never stopped mentioning that I could still apply to medical school. She never stopped telling people at church that I was doing very well in finance, but that I had always been more of a scientist at heart. I stopped correcting her. I let her tell her version of my life, because I had my own version now, and it was going very well. I moved to Chicago at 25. I took a position at a larger firm that specialized in alternative investments. The work was more complex, the stakes were higher, the people were sharper. I loved every part of it. I worked harder than I ever had. I spent evenings studying markets. I spent weekends reading about economic theory and financial history. I built a reputation slowly and carefully, not with noise, with results. By the time I was 28, I had made partner. Not a senior partner, not yet, but a partner nonetheless. At 28, at a firm where most people did not make partner before their late 30s. My boss, a man named Gerald Park, took me to dinner to celebrate. He told me I had something rare. He said most people in finance had sharp minds but limited patience. He said I had both. He said the combination was unusual. He said it was powerful. I thanked him. I went home that night and sat with a glass of water at my kitchen table in my apartment in Lincoln Park. I thought about the road that had led me here. I thought about Ohio. I thought about the mailbox I had checked every day in March of my senior year. I thought about the silence that had followed. I thought about the cold, calm voice that had said, maybe it just did not happen. And for the first time in years, I let myself wonder why. The answer came by accident. I was not looking for it. I was not conducting an investigation. I was not trying to open an old wound. I was home for Christmas. I was 30 years old. My grandmother on my mother's side was turning 80, and the whole family had gathered at my aunt's house in Millfield. It was a warm, noisy afternoon. There was food everywhere. There were cousins I had not seen in years. There was laughter. There was the particular kind of chaos that only a large family gathering can produce. My Uncle Marcus was there, the surgeon, the family legend. He was older now, gray at the temples, but still with the same easy confidence he had always carried. We were standing on the back porch after dinner with small plates of dessert, just the two of us, watching the yard. He asked how work was going. I told him. He seemed genuinely impressed. He said he had always known I was going to do something significant. He said he had said that to my mother years ago. I asked him what he meant. He paused. He looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression, like he was deciding whether to say something. Then he said, not unkindly, that he remembered when my Harvard acceptance came. He remembered my mother calling him. I felt the air go out of the porch. I did not say anything. I just looked at him. He continued. He said she had called him in a panic. He said she was worried that if I went to Harvard for literature or history or whatever it was I wanted to study, I would never come back to Ohio. He said she was worried I would become someone she did not recognize. He said she had asked him what she should do. He said he had told her to let me go. He said he had told her that Harvard was Harvard and I had earned it. He said she had not taken his advice. He stopped talking. He looked at his plate. He said he had always assumed I knew. He said he was sorry if he had said something he should not have. I told him it was fine. I told him I was glad to know. My voice was very steady when I said it. I was surprised by how steady it was. We went back inside. I spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing and helping clear dishes. I said goodbye to everyone warmly. I hugged my grandmother. I told my mother I would call her when I got back to Chicago. She hugged me at the door. She smelled like the same perfume she had always worn. She told me to drive carefully. I drove back to my hotel. I sat in the parking lot for 25 minutes before going inside. I was not crying. I was not shaking. I was just sitting, very still, very quiet, with something enormous moving through me. Let me tell you what I was thinking in that parking lot. I was thinking about 18-year-old Daniel who checked the mailbox every single day. I was thinking about the way I had gone over my application in my mind, looking for the flaw, looking for the reason. I was thinking about the night I sat on the edge of my bed and told myself maybe I was not good enough. I was thinking about the way I had adapted, the way I had accepted, the way I had enrolled in the program my mother wanted without ever once thinking the problem was not with me, but with her. That was the part that was hardest to sit with. Not the loss of Harvard, the loss of myself, the loss of 18-year-old Daniel's confidence in his own judgment. Because what she had done was not just take a letter. She had made me doubt myself at the exact moment in life when a person most needs to believe in their own vision. And I had spent years building that belief back. Years of work, years of quiet, years of choosing myself one small decision at a time. And I had gotten there. I had actually gotten there. But the cost was real. The cost had been paid in ways that could not be undone. I thought about whether I was angry. I examined that feeling carefully. There was something there, yes, but it was not hot. It was not the kind of anger that makes you want to shout or confront or expose. It was something colder, more focused, more patient. I thought about what I actually wanted, not what I thought I should want, not what a therapist might suggest I pursue. What I, Daniel Mercer, sitting in a hotel parking lot in Millfield, Ohio at 30 years old, actually wanted. The answer came slowly, but when it came, it was very clear. I did not want an apology. She would not give me a real one anyway. I did not want a confrontation. That would only make her defensive and small and would leave me feeling empty afterward. I did not want sympathy. I had built a life that did not need sympathy. I wanted something different. I wanted something lasting. Something she would understand without words. Something that would stand long after any argument had faded. And I already knew, even in that parking lot, what it was going to be. The next year was one of the most productive of my career, not because of what happened at the firm, though things were going well there, because of what I was building outside of work. I had been quietly investing a portion of my own earnings for several years, not aggressively, carefully, with the same patience I brought to everything. I had made several very good decisions in private markets that had compounded well over time. I had also been approached the previous spring by a small technology company in Boston that was looking for a strategic advisor. I took the role. 12 months later, they were acquired. My advisory shares were part of that deal. The number that landed in my account after closing was significant. Very significant. More than I had ever held at one time. I sat with that number for several weeks. I thought about what it was for. I thought about the future and what I wanted to build. I thought about the past and what it had cost me. And I thought about a decision I had been carrying quietly since the night in that parking lot. Yale University's endowment fund had a program for donors who wanted to support undergraduate scholarships specifically for first-generation college students from small towns in the Midwest. Yale and Harvard had been rivals for centuries. Academic rivals, cultural rivals, the kind of rivalry that meant something in the world I now lived in. I had done my research over the preceding year. I had spoken with the Yale Development Office quietly and carefully. I had understood the process. I had understood what a gift of a certain size would do, what it would be named, what it would mean. A $500,000 gift to Yale's scholarship fund for first-generation Midwestern students would establish a named scholarship, the Daniel Mercer Scholarship for First-Generation Scholars, named for me, not for my family, not for my hometown, for me, for the person I had built in spite of everything. I signed the paperwork on a Tuesday morning in my Chicago apartment. I made the transfer that afternoon. I called no one. I told no one. I just sat with it for a while, with the quiet enormity of it. I thought about some 18-year-old kid from a small town somewhere in Indiana or Iowa or Ohio who would one day open a letter and read that they had received the Daniel Mercer Scholarship to Yale University. I thought about that kid walking across a campus they had earned their place on, carrying their own vision without anyone taking it from them. That thought was worth more to me than anything I could have said in an argument, worth more than any apology, worth more than any confrontation. The announcement came through the university's press channels 6 weeks later. Yale issued a release about several significant new donations to the scholarship endowment. My name was in it. My background was mentioned. Small town in Ohio, first-generation college student, partner at a Chicago investment firm. It was a modest paragraph in a larger announcement, but it circulated in the kinds of circles that my mother's world occasionally touched. Someone from our church in Millfield saw it shared on a community alumni page. That someone mentioned it to someone else, and eventually my mother called me. I was at my desk when my phone lit up with her name. I looked at it for a moment before picking up. She asked if it was true. I said yes. She was quiet. She asked, why Yale? I let a beat of silence pass. Then I told her that Yale had felt like the right place for the kind of future I wanted to support. She asked what that meant. I said it meant that I wanted to give first-generation students a chance that circumstances might otherwise deny them. I said it as simply and cleanly as I could, without accusations, without sharpness, with just enough truth for her to hear what I was really saying. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said my name. Just my name, like she was reading it from a page. I said yes. She said she hoped I was happy. I told her I was. I told her I genuinely was. She said goodbye. I said goodbye. I put the phone down. I looked out the window at Chicago, at the gray winter sky over the lake, at the buildings rising cold and tall against it, and I felt something I had not expected. Not satisfaction exactly, not triumph, something quieter, something more like resolution, like a note that had been playing just slightly off key for 13 years had finally found its proper pitch. I want to talk about something that does not get discussed enough when people tell stories like this, because this story is not really about Harvard. It is not really about Yale. It is not even really about my mother, as central as she is to what happened. It is about what you do when someone you love makes a choice that costs you something real, when the person who was supposed to be in your corner is the one who moved the goalpost. What do you do with that? Because there are a lot of answers people will give you. Some people will say you confront them. Some people will say you forgive them. Some people will say you cut them off. Some people will say you go to therapy and work through it. And maybe all of those answers are right for different people in different situations. But what I have come to believe after 31 years of living my own life and watching other people live theirs is that the most powerful thing you can do with that kind of pain is not to direct it outward. It is to build something with it. Build something real. Build something that outlasts the injury. Build something that turns the cost into a foundation. Because the cost was real. I will not pretend otherwise. Losing the chance to go where I had earned the right to go changed the early shape of my life. I do not know what I would have been if I had gone to Harvard at 18. I genuinely do not know. Maybe I would have been happier sooner. Maybe I would have found my direction faster. Maybe I would have avoided years of being in the wrong lane. But I also know that the detour made me something. The years at Ohio State made me adaptable. The economics class that changed my direction taught me that the right path sometimes finds you sideways. The years of building slowly, carefully, without a famous name on my diploma to open doors for me, taught me that doors can be built too, not just walked through, built. That's a lesson I wouldn't trade. There are things I wish had been different. I want to be honest about that too. I wish she had trusted me. I wish she had believed that the child she raised was capable of going somewhere vast and finding himself back to himself. I wish she understood that loving someone means letting them be who they actually are, not the version of them that lives in your own imagination, not the continuation of a story that was always yours, not theirs. Real love, the kind that serves the person being loved, requires a kind of courage that is very hard to practice. It requires you to stand beside someone while they walk towards something you do not fully understand. It requires you to trust them even when you are afraid for them, even when you are afraid of losing them. I do not know if my mother was ever capable of that. I think she loved me as fully as she knew how. I think her fear of losing me to a world she could not follow me into was real. I think she made a decision that made sense inside her own limited vision of what love required. I do not hate her for that. I have worked hard not to carry hate. Hate is heavy. Hate keeps you looking backward, and I have too much ahead of me to spend my energy looking at what is behind. But I also will not pretend that what she did was small. It was not small, and the fact that it came from love does not make it right. Both of those things are true at the same time. I have made peace with both of those things. That peace was not easy, it was not fast, it was not a single moment of clarity. It was a long, slow process of choosing again and again to put my energy into building rather than burning, into creating rather than confronting, into becoming someone who stood on their own ground rather than someone still reacting to the ground that was taken from them. I still live in Chicago. I am now a senior partner at the firm. I sit on the advisory board of 2 nonprofits focused on educational access for students in rural and underserved communities. I speak at universities occasionally about first-generation professional pathways in finance. I have a good life, a genuinely good life, not the one that was planned for me, the one I chose, the one I built with the pieces I was given, including the broken ones, especially the broken ones. The Daniel Mercer Scholarship has now been awarded to 7 students, 2 from Indiana, 2 from Ohio, 1 from rural Michigan, 1 from Iowa, 1 from the eastern edge of Kentucky. Every year, I receive a brief note from the Yale Development Office with a summary of the recipients. Every year, I read it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Every year, I feel something that I do not have a precise word for. Something in the neighborhood of purpose, something in the neighborhood of completion. Not closure exactly. I do not think the word closure means what people want it to mean. The past does not close. It just becomes a different kind of present. It becomes the ground you are standing on, and you decide what you build on it. My mother and I still speak. Less often than before, but we speak. The conversation we had after the Yale announcement was never really finished. I think she understood what I was saying. I think she understood it in the way that people understand things they cannot fully admit to themselves. She has never said the words out loud. I have never asked her to. I do not need them the way I once might have. What I needed was to know. I know. What I needed was to act in a way that was true to who I am. I did. The rest is between her and herself. I am not responsible for the accounting she does in her own conscience. I am only responsible for mine. And mine is clear. Completely clear. If this story stayed with you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done with 13 years of unanswered questions? How do you turn pain into something that lasts? Leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about people who chose to build instead of break, subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories coming, and they are all true in the ways that matter.